Okay, so we're just going to start our last subtopic for session 2, and that's downstream beneficiation. So we're going to start off with Jenny Broadhurst, and I've been asked to read a short quote of hers, such as Dee had at the beginning of her first speech, and it is, "Life begins where the comfort zone ends." Okay, thank you.
Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Nicole. And I have to confess that I'm very much out of my comfort zone at the moment. And working with Dee, I'm getting very used to it. So let's begin. So I think Dee mentioned earlier that at Minerals to Metals, we are very focused on transdisciplinary research across the whole mineral value chain. But this morning, my presentation is going to provide a very brief overview of the recent and current research projects in the specific area of downstream mineral beneficiation research. So to start off with our complete projects that we've completed over the last year or so, Takunda Chitaka did an MPhil study on sustainability performance and decision-making for minerals beneficiation for the South African iron and steel scrap industry. Nicole Hearn's M2M study entailed an economic impact analysis of mineral beneficiation in KwaZulu-Natal's iron and steel and aluminium value chains. Ayanda Mangoi, he's a social anthropologist, and he studied youth entrepreneurship in a community around large-scale mining and manufacturing in Richards Bay. And then Corey Bevan and Jaishal Naidu, they did a fourth-year or honours-level project that looked at the barriers and opportunities in the South African limestone industry. And the first 3 projects listed here were all formed part of a much broader programmatic project to develop a minerals beneficiation strategy for the KwaZulu-Natal province. And my colleague Hero van Blotnitz will tell you a little bit more about that project in the next presentation. But what I'm going to do here is provide a snapshot of the objectives and the key outcomes of the postgraduate student projects that supported and informed the development of the strategy. So let's starting off with Takunda's project, which investigated the applicability of a sustainability decision support framework for informing policy development in the context of alternatives for iron and steel scrap. And the alternatives that were investigated here include export or local recycling, either to the steel mills or to the foundry. And Takunda study found that despite government concerns and recent policies to restrict scrap export, the actual scrap processors themselves were far more concerned about the availability of the correct quality of scrap. So a lot of the scrap that is currently being exported is actually not suitable for recycling any rate. And not surprisingly, another major concern was around microeconomic issues relating to profitability. So it was costs of labour and electricity, and also declined revenue due to cheap imports and competition from those imports. Her study also found that whilst rigorous stakeholder engagement was really essential in policy development for minerals beneficiation, when applied on its own, it could result in sustainability and many sustainability issues being sidelined or ignored completely. And so her study recommended that in order to facilitate informed decision-making, that the stakeholder perceptions should be integrated into a structured decision support framework, which made use of rigorous multi-criteria decision analysis techniques and other quantitative and analytical tools to ensure that the relevant issues were rigorously addressed. And moving on to Nicole's study, which used the provincial social accounting matrix and multiplier effects to determine the effect of increased minerals beneficiation on the stimulation of both upstream production and social economic development in the province. And as I mentioned earlier, we're looking specifically at iron and steel and aluminium value chains. And her studies found that the increased beneficiation of these chains actually would significantly increase the economic and welfare gains. And the gains that were being looked at here were increases in GDP, in capital expenditure, in regional productivity, tax revenues, as well as employment of local people. However, this increase in minerals beneficiation would also result in significant leakages due to the simultaneous stimulation of imports, and was potentially constrained by the shortage of electricity supply, as well as likely future increases in the price of electricity. And contrary to how the engineers work, she actually ended her study with a question that she posed. And this question was, what would be the cost of buying out the province's aluminium smelters and releasing their power to the national grid? And to my mind, to my knowledge, the economists haven't taken up her challenge and addressed this question yet. So moving on to Ayanda's study. So this was an ethnographic study to explore entrepreneurial activities and aspirations, specifically amongst young black males in industry-based communities, and the extent to which these are aligned with formal enterprise development programs in the Richards Bay area. And Ayanda found that despite all the good intentions, these enterprise development programs are not underpinned by a comprehensive understanding of emergent entrepreneurship and enterprise, and do not take into account the aspirations and existing skills amongst young entrepreneurs. And to put it in the words of one of his contacts, who said, the people who develop and run these programs, they don't know what it means to turn 10 Rand into 50 Rand and 50 Rand into 100 Rand. And Ayanda's recommendation to these programs was that they would be a lot more effective if they aimed at building on and learning from the resilient commitment of youth to dreaming and aspirations, even in the absence of resources. So it was quite an interesting study to be involved with. I enjoyed it. So we've also got a number of projects that are currently in progress and various stages of development. Luke Farrell, he's doing his M4 in PPE, and that's Politics, Philosophy and Economics. And he's addressing the rather controversial question as to whether mineral beneficiation is a good or bad policy paradigm. And he's exploring this question in the particular context of the local titanium industry. Coming from a very different perspective is Gerrit Mouton, he's vice president of one of the major platinum producers around here, and he's looking at he's doing an assessment of drivers, barriers, and opportunities for the development of platinum value chains. Shuhei Kato, I'm not going to say anything about his project because he's going to be speaking just now, and I don't want to steal his thunder. And then lastly, Tapiwa Chimganda she's working on a PhD concept looking at the application of complexity theory for metal forecasting, and once again looking at a platinum case study. And she's one of our ex-graduates who's now working for a forecasting company. So that should be quite interesting. So in true minerals to metals spirit, all these projects are conducted in collaboration with academics and specialists from various disciplines. And these specialists and academics include Dr. Divine Few from the Department of Social Anthropology at UCT, Professors Anthony Black and Tony Lehman from the School of Economics, also at UCT, my colleague Professor Harold von Blocknitz from the Environmental and Process Systems Engineering Group, Dr. Brett Cohen, who's a founding director of the Greenhouse, and that's a niche sustainability consultancy organization that specializes in policy and strategy development. And then very well-known Professor Ben Turok, who probably needs no introduction. He's a very well-known political activist and an economist extraordinaire. So we've also been talking to the Department of Industrial Engineering at the University of Stellenbosch, and this just shows a program of a joint workshop that we held with this department in August to start exploring, to get to know each other and the different activities that we're engaged with in projects, and to start exploring how we can work together to maximum benefit. And I think on that note, Hera, I will leave it over to you to tell them a little bit more about the mineral beneficiation policy strategy.